All right. And we are live. This is Campfire number 9, and the very first one with a new camp instructor, I believe. I'll have to check, but I believe it's really the very first one that we have an instructor with us. And not any instructor, Olaf Minkowicz, who has been with New Camp, and I hope I didn't butcher your last name. I didn't practice it enough, maybe.
No, you did good.
Yeah, that was good. Okay. But yeah, Olaf has been with us since 2018, and we started together in and around Tacoma, Washington, where New Camp really was born, almost 5 years ago now. So Olaf, it's a real pleasure to have you join the show and sharing with us your journey as a software engineer, as a security intelligence and warfare intelligence in the military. We'll talk about that. And as a teacher, as a game developer, I mean, you've had so many different hats and you've been able to pursue so many of your passions. We'll get into that. But to get started, do you mind maybe just like introducing yourself? Where are you from? What are you doing right now? And then we'll get into it.
Yeah, yeah. The too long didn't read version is originally from New York. Enlisted into the military for where I was in the military for about 8 years. I worked as a systems maintainer and integrator, military intelligence systems maintainer and integrator, which is basically a systems engineer. Um,
Yeah.
that does work for the military intelligence community, setting up servers, working with hardware, networks, stuff like that. So I did that for about 8 years. I did a bunch of freelance work in between then too, front end stuff mostly. Um, while I was transitioning out of the military, I started focusing more on software engineering, making more that my primary focus. Started finishing up school, took a couple more jobs, part-time contract work. I did some technical writing for Zenva. They do a lot of educational videos, mostly for game development. I did some teaching for coding with kids, which is basically kind of similar to what I would say like New Camp or other boot camps kind of are, but for children. So I would say it's similar to what Teals is for Microsoft, which is
Mhm.
another one that I kind of helped out with and taught for about a year. Um, Started teaching for Boot Camp and been with them for, I guess, 4 years now. I thought it was three, but I guess it is four now.
Yeah, it is
Um,
4. I checked
yeah.
it. Yeah.
So I did that. And when I got out of the military in January 2020, I started working for Microsoft as a full-time employee as a software engineer. And I did that for almost 2 years. Towards the end, I transferred to a um, site reliability engineer role, and recently started working at a DoD startup called Rise 8, working as a full stack engineer there. And I've also been working as a part-time lead game developer at a studio, my own studio that I actually founded with a bunch of other engineers, musicians, and artists. For about 2 years, we're working pretty diligently on one main game and a bunch of prototypes to hopefully release in the next year or two, and
That's
have like.
awesome. Well, I wanna spend some time on that. I think that's probably a lot of the listeners that are gonna be quite interested in understanding how you got into game development.
Um, I'm trying to see if I missed anything. I probably did, but I can't recall it right now. I think I hit the majority of the points and stuff that I've
Yeah,
basically been doing. So
yeah. So let's actually start at the beginning, and maybe not it's not exactly the beginning, but I want to share with the folks when you say that you joined the military. Your first, I think one of your first experience in the military was, there you go. You were a military intelligence electronic warfare system administrator or system operator.
hmm
So you were in the electronic warfare, um, which for me sounds either warfare games, the ones that, I mean, back in the days, like 30 years ago, I think that movie came out. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was about? Or I mean, is that all confidential and you can't really
Yeah,
share it?
I mean, there's confidential stuff, but there's plenty of stuff I could talk about. My like I said, my primary role was kind of like a jack of all trades, systems engineer. So I was the system administrator, I was the network administrator, I was the server administrator. Unfortunately, because there weren't that many individuals in my position, in my role. Our training takes about a year,
Hmm.
and they really do compact a lot of stuff. You start off with just the basics of hardware, AC, DC, right, and then you just keep going from there. So it takes a year long of training. It takes a long while, like a good amount of couple of years for the investigation to go through to get your clearance, um, and basically you are the de facto almost like IT personnel to help out all the other individuals in the military intelligence community. So like the warfare games, yeah, those still happen. That's a real thing, and that's it's not classified by any means. And whenever they did happen, and there were training exercises or anything like that, me and my colleagues who did the same job would be there to help set up a lot of those environments, run those cables, get these systems operational, get these databases set up, get these servers set up, stuff like that. So
Were you monitoring like warfare incursion or things like that? Were you like on call to because something was happening and
so
you had to
we,
respond quickly?
we definitely were on call, but it wasn't more like cyber stuff. Cyber stuff didn't start. Cyber cyber really wasn't that big like it is now
Yeah.
until recently. I
Mm.
don't even think when I first joined that they actually had cyber jobs at that point in time. I would say that if anything, they were lacking in that area. So we definitely were on call for stuff like because we would we're talking about like we were also the ones who would literally were setting up the satellites to actually get the feed going, right? So we were like the all around team to do everything. But we didn't really like we would monitor to make sure that packages were being sent correctly, but we weren't there to like do any red blue team kind of stuff.
I see. Gotcha. All right. Hey, so let's pause a second. Anyone who's joining on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, we are streaming live on all three platforms right now. You can actually join the conversation with Olaf and myself. You have a link here. The Nightbot is nice enough to share the link. It's url.newcamp.co/dial-in. As long as you have a good connection, your mic is open, your camera is available, you can actually join from your phone. Some people have done that, and you can just join the conversation and ask the question. So, Olaf, you would you say you have a traditional developer background? Like, did you learn coding, in college and then got your first job, or I mean, how would you characterize and maybe describe your background as a web developer or coder or game developer or system administrator? How did you get started?
Um, I'm definitely self-taught.
Yeah,
Right now, I would say it's a mixture, because of I'm still in school, I've gotten degrees, continuing education is a real thing. But I remember like being 10, 11, started learning, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, started learning like basic, you know, so a lot of the stuff in the beginning was definitely self-taught.
yeah. Oh, so you really started at a young age. I remember being on my Apple II as well. Yeah. Yeah. When you start that young, you have a knack for it. And so, but did you pursue at the time like a computer science bachelor or something like that? Or did you learn with your first job in the army?
Uh, Surprisingly, not a lot of programming in that job. There was a
Oh, yeah.
little bit of scripting, and at some point in time, I was actually doing COBOL. So it was just
Oh,
just
wow.
really old stuff, but not a lot of programming. And even though I was messing around with programming a lot and making websites as a kid, I don't think I fully understood it as much as I do now.
Yeah.
Because if I definitely did, I probably would have never been in the military. I would just continue doing that. So I'm basically self-taught.
Okay. And so, can you tell us why you decided to become a teacher, an instructor? I mean, you actually really started pretty early in your career. You talked about, I think it's coding for kids.
Hmm.
Yeah, coding for kids. So, or coding with kids. and then you joined, or maybe at the same time you were with New Camp.
Yeah.
Um, so what brought you to teaching?
Well, a couple things. But I would say one of the primary things is I didn't have that opportunity as a child myself.
Mm, yeah.
And I really didn't have that support from my parents. I think if you can nurture that in children or even adults now, be there as a mentor for them, it
Hmm.
really helps out a lot, right? And I've definitely seen that from like basically the mentors that I had when I was in the military.
Yeah.
So, if you can be there for someone and help them learn and make them better, it's a really good feeling for the person doing it, right? Because I feel like you've affected their lives to a degree that you normally couldn't. So I think it makes your life just feel like full,
Yeah.
like you're making an impact, and it's kind of worth doing and worth living. I would say like that's definitely one of the bigger reasons that I chose to do it. So,
Are you staying in touch with some of your students, and do you have things that come to mind, like when you think about your students, maybe stories um, about how you've impacted their lives?
yeah, no, I definitely keep in touch with a few of them. I actually reached out to a couple of them to actually interview with the current company that I'm at. I'm always just whenever there's like any other jobs or opportunities, I always reach out to them like, hey, maybe you should check this out. I definitely helped like a few of them after they graduated, after a couple months turn around, because I thought they were good enough, to come
Yeah.
and interview and teach for New Camp. So they turned around eventually and started teaching at New Camp themselves. So I definitely think that helped them too. I think being a teacher also kind of helps reinforce a lot of the knowledge that you normally um, would maybe take for granted, because you
Yeah.
definitely have to almost kind of like at least a good teacher. There are definitely bad teachers, but a good teacher um, won't always know everything, right? But maybe will be able to help you find the information and also can explain it really well. So,
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The act of explaining something to someone else forces you to really think differently about what it is about. And oftentimes, when, especially when you're teaching kids, when you have to really make it as simple as possible, uh, it actually helps you yourself understand the concept that you're describing. I mean, we don't do it enough. You don't actually have to teach someone. You can just try to, speak out loud and explain the concepts to yourself out loud. But it's kind of awkward and nobody really does it, right? And so, yeah, that process of explaining something to someone else, actually, you can learn from that as well. And sometimes I don't know if that happened to you, kind of catch yourself trying to describe it and explain it, and then midway you realize that you're wrong.
oh, all the time, yeah. I feel if I
And so,
can't explain it to myself, then I probably don't know the material good enough. That's how I
yeah,
try to do it.
yeah. And I see Zandra saying, "Hey, to teach is to learn twice." Yeah, that's definitely the case. So, anyone online, either on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, don't hesitate to ask your questions in the chat. We're going to see them, or join us, join Olaf and myself if you would like to as well, so to have the conversation. So you started New Camp in 2018, and typically a teacher with New Camp will teach in periods of 4 to 5 weeks. I'm going to ask you questions you may not know the answers to, but I do because I just checked it out.
Okay.
How many sessions of 4 to 5 weeks do you think you've taught so far with New Camp?
Um, More than 12, less than 24.
Oh, yeah, you're there. 21.
Yeah.
21 sessions, and which is, I mean, it's awesome. It's actually quite rare. I'll tell you, it's quite rare to see an instructor really staying committed for such a long period of time. And oftentimes these are great instructors as well that have had the chance of, you know, bringing that time allocation into their routine, right? So I'm guessing you probably now in teaching as new camp is probably part of your routine. Um, do you know what your average instructor score is?
Um, I think it's like 4.6, 4.7, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. It's 4.64. So you've received 692 ratings from students, and overall, your rating is 4.64, which is amazing. I mean, out of five, it's pretty rare to have a rating like that. So, I mean, it speaks to your commitment, the how much students appreciate you. Um, let's. So, some people are starting to ask questions live now. Let's yeah, let's look at some of those questions. Can you see the ones that I'm clicking here? One is
Mhm.
from Code Thin. Any pre-work would you suggest getting familiar with before joining the new camp program?
Um, yeah. Um, I think there's nothing wrong with being overly prepared. Um, especially, I definitely think new camps is the most best priced boot camp out there, but still being over prepared to come in so you can have a really better understanding and not get overwhelmed, because you still will. Even if you're prepared, you're still going to get overwhelmed, but you can
Yeah,
manage your expectations and manage how overwhelmed you're going to get. Um, there's a bunch of free resources, free code camp. I
yeah,
would definitely say go through that. Um, and you might be thinking, oh, but like, isn't that what new camp does? That I'm going to be going through a lot of the same things. Yes and no. Throughout your career, you might be writing in maybe just one language the whole time, but it's never going to be the same thing. You're always going to be getting new issues with new problems that you might have never thought to encounter. It's a consistent learning curve. Um, it will get easier over time, but there's always going to be new things that you would have never thought to stumble upon. So I would definitely say, if you're looking at free resources, I would say definitely free Code Camp is definitely a really good one. Um, there's a bunch of YouTube streamers that do a lot of stuff. You can go ahead peruse through that. Um, some other ones, again, kind of going into like more ones that you'd have to pay. Um, I would definitely say stuff like, what is it? Code Academy, not a boot camp at
yeah.
all. But it has, again, similar resources. I think they have a free one too, so you could do that. Udacity has a bunch of free resources. I would say go through that. That would definitely, these are like all really good supplementary resources that I even tell my students to utilize. So if you do this like ahead of time, it's just gonna help reinforce a lot of these things and give you more time to like maybe either work on your portfolio projects, which will help you stand out once you like finish new camp and stuff like that. Um, there's also a lot of good books out there. A lot of people don't like books. You could read the PDFs, but I definitely always recommend HTML and CSS by John Duckett, and he
Yeah.
made a JavaScript and jQuery one. I recommend these books more so than any other ones because I think HTML, CSS, and JavaScript having a really good foundation of the basics is super important, and it's very much a visual learning book comparative to like just like maybe reading a O'Reilly book, which is just like documentation. John Duckett books are very pleasing to the eye. Like whoever did the UI UX for that book did a great job. The way they break down the snippets and the examples, it's very easy to consume. And
That's
everyone that
great.
I've recommended to, a lot of the students I've recommended to, have loved it. So.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I think, would you say that it's important to spend really a good amount of time on JavaScript itself?
Oh yeah, most definitely. There's a huge amount to JavaScript. HTML is always going to be the easy one.
Yeah.
CSS is definitely going to be one that is going to start causing some issues for individuals, especially when they start learning about positioning elements, flexbox, and grid and stuff like that. CSS, yeah, there's definitely going to be a huge learning curve. The sooner you can get started with sorry, not CSS, with JavaScript, the better you're
Yeah.
going to be off.
I would agree. Hey, let's actually take another question. That one is interesting because you're going to be able to answer it from an instructor standpoint. Why would an instructor choose new camp to teach versus anywhere else. And then you can give your own point of view on why will the student choose new camp. And then we'll get back to your journey, and I want to get into the game development that you're doing as well. So in your mind, and maybe your personal decision to join new camp, why would an instructor join new camp to teach? And then after that, if you don't mind, why would you say that a student should join new camp?
Why should an instructor choose new camp to teach? Um, I've taught a bunch of other um, boot camps or mentored other boot camps. I've done Thinkful, and I think their coursework's pretty good. I didn't like. It seemed for me that the instructor wasn't as able to kind of interact with the students as much. So I didn't like that myself. It was also much pricier, right? One of the
Mhm,
biggest selling points. Well, I'll get to that, I guess, for students. So for instructor, you get to interact more with the students. I feel like and make a bigger impact with New Camp, um, comparatively to something like Thinkful or I would say even MSSA, Microsoft's one. Um, uh, Even when I mentored there, I didn't feel like I was making as much as impact. As an
mhm,
instructor, you really will be able to make a much greater impact. Um, and I think the way that hours are scheduled for New Camp, they're also very flexible for the instructor too. um, like a lot of the coursework's already laid out for you, right? So a lot of the time you can be spent more on the interactions, the one-on-one interactions with the students, helping them create the code or explaining specific topics to them, which will really reinforce your understanding of the material.
mhm.
It's like what is it? The saying, killing two birds with one stone, right? Like you're giving back, but also it really is helping you. If you want to become a better um, uh, software engineer, web developer, whatever you want to be, um, you have to teach to some degree. Like if you choose not to teach for New Camp, you should still be teaching the people you're working with on your team,
Yeah,
uh, right?
exactly.
It's going to make a huge difference.
Well, the difference between a junior developer and a senior developer is the senior developer is the one teaching the junior developer. So if you want to become a senior developer and not be a junior developer anymore, teach someone else.
Yeah.
And you're going to learn from it yourself. So now, why would you say a student should choose New Camp?
Um, I'm actually trying to convince my fiance to
Oh,
well, I
really?
think I've already convinced her to take New Camp. So in the near future, she's going to be taking New Camp
We
because
should talk about a discount code for her
yeah,
offline.
she's been studying and she's been doing really good with like the supplementary material. So I
Yeah.
think New Camp is fantastic. I think the price point for New Camp is just hands down like one of the best selling factors. And on top of that, the material is really good. Uh, like we keep going through and updating the material consistently, so it's always fresh and up to date with the newest like either versions of the libraries. Like we just released, was it the Python course? Was it about a couple months ago, 4 months ago?
Yeah.
Was it
Yeah.
August, September?
August. Yeah.
Yeah. So um, there is two branches to choose now, either the full stack engineer or the software engineer. So you have variety too. And like if you're trying to break in either of those, we covered the vast majority of information. So um, if you want a really good stepping stone, I think this is a really good stepping stone. Besides the material, the fact that you have access to a lot of instructors who do this full time, so they can like guide you and be like, this is a supplementary material that might help you out. This is what you should be doing on your portfolio projects. How to set up your GitHub, how to start networking, right? All these things that if this is what you want to make a career, can help lead you down there and mentor you. you know, um, I think New Camp does a really good job for it. And you don't have to break the bank, right? You don't have to, uh, you know, um, sell like a portion of your house to go ahead and attend this. And the time commitment, you do have to definitely put in time into it. Time is money. That is just a realistic thing. Um, but the fact that you can still, if you are working, still work the current job you are and do this part time is not something that a lot of other boot camps were doing. They're trying to do that now, but I think New Camp still does it better than most of them. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate the feedback. I'll say, connecting back to your point on your experience as an instructor, uh, if you're an instructor in a bootcamp that mentors students one on one, very often that means that there is no real classroom environment. So just a ton of coding bootcamps out there that will enroll students, and you're going to be part of the program, but you're still going to be on your own. Like, you're not going to necessarily work with a lot of other students, and your interaction with the coding bootcamp is going to be that one mentor that you're going to have, who's going to check in with you. I mean, once a week, maybe twice a week. How
Yep.
often were you checking on students? Once a week?
Uh, where in New Camp or?
No, at the other bootcamp.
Yeah. What is it? MSSA. I think they do it maybe once every 2 weeks,
Once every two
and
weeks.
Thankful. I think they did it once or twice a week, which
Yeah,
for we're talking about really short periods of time.
yeah. And so that's, I mean, it has an advantage of having someone to talk directly to, but you're missing, and that's why the new camp formula is the way it is. You're missing that classroom environment. You're missing being with other students, learning at the same pace, knowing them a little bit more, and then having that, that one instructor also available throughout the week and on Saturdays. So it's a different experience. Hey, someone just want to salute you, Army Strong, right here. Um, let's continue with the questions. Oh yeah. So okay, let's take that one, and I'll take that one myself. Um, I'm 41, Dallas, Texas. You're looking into coding because you want to have a better career and a good salary, which is absolutely fair, of course. What advice would we have for you to make it a little less, a little stress free? I will say to that you really want to make sure that you're going to appreciate and like coding. It's totally fine to have compensation as a motivation. If that's the only motivation, it's actually going to be harder for you to become one, because if you don't enjoy coding, if you don't like, spending the time in front of your computer and writing lines of code, you're not going to be committed and perseverant enough to actually go through it. And the best way for you to validate that is to actually start online. And so I'll connect back to what you were saying, Olaf. It's Free Code Camp, it's Udemy. Spend 1, 2, 3, 4 months learning online with as many resources that you can to really stretch yourself and see if you like it. Build stuff, make sure that you work on projects during that time and validate that you're going to like it. Once you do that, then you're going to have an option to either potentially continue on your own, self-taught, or join a coding bootcamp. But make sure that compensation and salary is not going to be the only driving factor for you. You have to enjoy it. The next question for you is from Chain, Olaf, and this one is going to get us to game development. Uh, why don't you tell us a little bit? I mean, this is a question. What's the most intuitive language that you've used for game development? But before answering it, would you mind telling us about your journey to game development and how you got to creating your own studio, which is mind blowing, I would say. What are
Sure.
you working on right now? What is the game? I don't know if you can even share your screen. If you see the buttons to share your screen, and if you can do a demo, uh, maybe we'll take the risk. Maybe not. I don't know. You'll tell me. But yeah, tell us everything about this adventure that you're going through right now.
Sure. Well, I've always liked video games. I was a bit more of a recluse when I was younger, comparatively to my extroverted self when I was in the military. So I played a lot of video games, and I actually got into making really small games when I was young. Just messing around with game engines and writing just lines of code and breaking a lot of stuff. But it was fun. And that kind of led me into actually web development, which
Oh,
then eventually led me into the military, which led me back into web development and then game development. Um, I don't think there is any specific intuitive language. Um, you just need to kind of like choose a language that you kind of like, maybe you could do some research on the market. Most of the market currently, right, uses either C sharp or C++ for game development, and one of the two biggest engines are Unity and Unreal. But that doesn't mean that you can't use other languages for game development. Python uses Pygame and does a bunch of great stuff for that. I personally, at my studio, use Phaser, which is a JavaScript library, um, and they have some IDEs, kind of level editors that you can use, but it's really just much easier to write everything in like VS Code. Um, and Phaser is fantastic. It's definitely like one of the top-notch JavaScript libraries out there. So if you're already kind of learning web development, it really just super easy to pick up because it's just JavaScript. There's nothing new
Yeah,
to it.
Phaser, how do you spell it? Phaser?
ASER. Yeah,
Phaser 3GS? Yeah, I can see it now.
yeah, yeah.
Let
Phaser
me
4 just came out.
Phaser.io.
Yep, yep.
Let me paste it here.
Yeah. And so we use that. We're doing a bunch of prototypes with that recently, and they have Zenva actually does a bunch of tutorials for them. Um, so there's that, and we also use GameMaker.
Yeah, maker.
GameMaker and Godot. Godot uses, I think, C sharp and JavaScript, I think, as well. Um, they're both really kind of low maintenance engines. There's not a lot to learn. It's not as overwhelming comparatively to Unity and Unreal that has a much more robust ecosystem, and there's just a lot in there.
Yeah.
Uh, GameMaker Studio 2 is kind of looked down upon in the industry, but it's actually underneath the hood. I think it's like C++ anyway, and the syntax for the language is remarkably similar to JavaScript. So
Okay.
you're not making a huge leap comparatively to, like, say, C sharp, where you're basically um, working in a strongly typed language, right? So, and that might be a rude awakening for a lot of individuals who are just,
Oh yeah.
having to work with
Yeah,
far.
moving. Yeah, if you've learned just JavaScript and then all of a sudden you're going into C sharp, that's a tough jump. Yeah. And C plus plus, don't even talk about it. I mean, you may never want to make the move. You'll be like, no, no,
Yeah.
put that away. So tell us about the game that you're building. What kind of game is it?
So we have a couple of prototypes that we're working on, and we're going to be actually releasing one of them before our main game gets released.
Wow.
Um, so one of those other games is a arcade style game. It's very similar to Dig Dug, but it's a roguelike as well. Um, and that's going to get released for mobile and for PC. Um, and
Oh, so
our
you mobile, so it's gonna be an app, or is it
Yeah,
gonna
yeah, it's going to be
so
on Android and iOS as well.
that's pretty cool. So you can just like React Native, you can actually build it in JavaScript and then package it as an app.
So that one's being built in GameMaker. They do the transpiling for you. Funny
Ah, I
enough,
see.
so they actually, once you're done, it'll build it for you if you choose the HTML5 export, and it builds it right into CSS, JavaScript, and HTML5. So at that point in time, if you want to do additional things with it, because it's limited in capabilities, for whatever reason, you can do that. You can
Yeah,
wrap it in Electron. You can throw it up on your own personal portfolio site, right? So you can do a bunch of things like that.
that's pretty
Um,
cool.
and the main game that we're currently working on is called Runner RNR, and it's a fusion of a bunch of elements, and it's basically a procedurally generated roguelike fighting game, right?
Ooh.
So it's very similar in kind of other games that have come out, like Super Meat Boy and a couple of these other platforming games, but it takes a lot of game design elements from stuff like Dynasty Warriors and these other like big action adventure games. Um, and that one's hopefully going to get released somewhere around April, March, early access next year. So
So when you say released, what's how do you release those games? Is it a Steam type of release? Is it like do you have just a website and now it's available? How does that work? And um, are you going to make money? And like are you selling it? How is that going to work? I mean, I'm super curious.
we'll see if we make. The plan is to make money. Um, so it's going to get released on Steam. We're going to be with talks and publishers probably towards the fourth quarter of this year. So hopefully at that point in time, the primary focus is to release on Steam and then on mobile because it plays really good on mobile. The issue is when you develop a lot of stuff for one platform, a lot of people who go through New Camp, they go, oh, media queries having designed for mobile, and for like a laptop or a desktop, you know, there's issues there. Um, well, when you have to start designing something for like a PC and then for Mac and then for Linux and then for iOS and Android, it becomes even more complex. So looking at itch.io for the PC release and Steam, and
Nice.
eventually Google Play and Android, the iOS store for the mobile release. Hopefully, if the talks with publishers go well, we'll eventually take that as along with the other one uh, to basically Switch, um, Xbox Game Pass, probably
Nice.
as well.
Yeah, because yeah, Xbox was pretty good at indie games, right? For a while. I think there was some blowback on what they made some changes to indie game contracts or something like that. Gotcha. Um, this is fascinating. When it's live, we need to talk about communicating that to the Newcomb community and making sure that our students have access to it. Question from Fabian Lopez. How do you get into the gaming industry after graduating New Camp?
Um, I would say don't. Unfortunately, that's
Yeah.
I love making video games. I actually like making video games more than like playing video games nowadays. Um, but the gaming industry, unfortunately, um, for the most part, doesn't pay as well comparatively to
Mm,
either just normal engineering jobs. So your quality of life overall, because the compensation will decline. There are really big name studios in Seattle that will pay you relatively low, around 30, 40,000 a year,
yeah,
comparatively to for doing game dev, comparatively to other studios there that will pay you maybe close to six figures for the same level of experience. If it's something that you really want to do, then I would say, do it in your either free time or try to um, basically build up for a portfolio, just like you would with NewCamp, um, building up a portfolio for either like a software engineer or a web developer position, and try to apply to different jobs out there. But you really would have a better time, probably because of the creative process and more freedom to
yeah,
go get a software engineer job, go get a full stack engineer job, a web developer job, right? Because a lot of those skills are transferable.
yeah.
You
That's
working
right.
with data structures, you
Mm.
working with algorithms, design patterns, all these things here transfers almost like one for one into game development. If anything, game development, depending where you work at, is lacking behind in a lot of these areas. So
Really? Oh wow! I would have thought that finding the perfect path for your NPCs and stuff like that. I mean, there's some advanced stuff that needs to happen in an engine, right?
oh
To
no, hundred
Yeah,
percent. Um, but there's definitely other portions in game development in certain studios that are lacking. There's plenty of talks that go about people just in the game industry that just recently just realized what DevOps is. So they're
oh, I
trying,
see.
so
Yeah.
you know, there's bits and pieces of here that are definitely lacking
Mhm.
comparatively to normal engineer work. I definitely would say if anybody wants to get into game development, I definitely support you. I hope you have a good time doing it. You definitely have more freedom in the creative process, and you can make more revenue directly to yourself if you just make your
Mhm.
own stuff. Release it, as an app. You can always do ads. Um, you can always charge like a dollar, make money that way, something like that. But also doing that in the beginning will probably help create your portfolio. So do that for a bit. Join a lot of game jams, right? Um, just like
What are
hackathon.
those? Are they online events?
Yeah, so just like hackathons
Yeah.
are there for engineers and web developers, game jams are there for people who are in the gaming industry or want to get in the game industry. You have a limited amount of time to basically develop a full-fledged game of some sort revolving around a theme. I would say, start doing those. Um, and especially if you're doing that, using JavaScript, again, you know, you can go ahead and uh, boost your skills up in
Mhm.
JavaScript for whatever web development or engineer work that you're doing. and then still be able to learn and get better at game development using that language.
That's awesome. Well, before we move from this subject, are you looking for any help? Like, should we? Do you want to make a call to action? Maybe. I mean, are you looking for someone to go to join and help, or anything like that?
So currently, unfortunately, we're not. We just
Yeah.
hired some new people.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, but
What is the URL of your website?
we don't have anything up yet. We're
Okay.
such a
All
small
right.
studio. Most of the
Yeah.
time are spent because a lot of the stuff that we do is all of us have full-time jobs. We come
Yeah.
back and we do another 4 to 5, 6 hours working on it. Um, a lot of our stuff's going to be, like I said, fourth quarter. Once we start talking to publishers, then we have to really put our suits on and start looking
Yeah.
really
That's
good
right.
because the
If you had a
product's finally
website,
completed.
if you had a website right now, it will be like a big one page coming soon type of thing,
Yeah.
right? All right, that makes sense. All right, so this is fascinating. I've been so seriously, I've been thinking, should New Camp build a game developer curriculum?
So funny enough, you say that. I've actually been thinking about bothering you about that for
Yeah,
quite a minute. There's a bunch of apps out there that do stuff, but they don't do it as well. I think it would definitely have been really good supplementary material for New Camp to have something, but that's something you'd have to think about down the road.
I think the demand. I think there's going to be a ton of people really excited about it. But I think you just said something that I did not think about too much, which is the prospect of jobs are really not that great, and so we will have to think about, I mean, why are you doing it? Are you doing it as a hobby? And I think a ton of people would love to learn just as a hobby. But if you're doing it to get a good paying job, it's like, hey, you want to be an actor in LA? Well, you can learn to be an actor, but are you going to get any job? So yeah, all right, that's cool. So there's another question from Teresa. Currently in New Camp, learning the fundamentals of Python. And you were, by the way, you've helped us quite a lot on the Python curriculum, so thank you for that. I currently work as a security guard. I have learned a little of cloud computing and Linux, but not enough to be certified. Are there job opportunities for my level? How would you answer Teresa here?
Um, am I making the assumption that Teresa's gonna have finished the whole Python course, right? Is that a good assumption to make when you're first
I think
answering the
so. I
question?
think, yeah, but I mean, and to your point, the job opportunities right now without finishing the Python curriculum are probably thin. Um, so yeah, let's say Teresa has finished the Python
Yeah.
curriculum.
I think definitely once she's finished it and has some stuff to show for it, um, knowing Linux, fantastic. In addition to that, I think that's
That's
great.
right. Yeah.
There's Amazon. Amazon uses Linux for everything. Linux in addition with Python and knowing like the cloud infrastructure stuff that we go over in the Python course and knowing a bit of the data structures and algorithms. There's I think if you put in some additional work in addition to that, because just knowing the bare minimum, just like going through anything really, um, is going to be hard for you. But if you do that and you're like you said, you already know some Linux, um, and then do some additional work on top of that, there's definitely going to be opportunities at your level. I would definitely. This is what I tell all my students. Whatever class I get them in, start networking. Networking on LinkedIn. Like that's the first thing you should do. You should network as much as possible because there definitely are opportunities out there. You just have to interact with individuals and try to um, get yourself out there as soon as possible. You don't want to finish new camp and then be like next day it's like okay I can get a job now. It's like no, you should have been kind of laying the foundation for that already previously. You kind of got all this knowledge occurred, and now you have to go ahead and try to send your resume out there. But if you network and you know either connect with recruiters or other individuals on LinkedIn, or even in person, that's going to help solidify. So overall, there definitely are entry level positions. There's more jobs out there than there are developers. So
Yeah.
definitely.
Great. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I was going to point out as well that the fact that she has had interest in learning cloud computing and Linux prior shows that there's really intention in becoming, a developer in the field, and that's really a good signal, that yeah, increases your chances of finding a job afterwards. James has another question, and then we'll talk about your time at Microsoft. So, and if you don't mind, actually, I'm going to answer that one, and you can, of course, chime in. Would you choose a coding bootcamp to just, I'm adding the just, to supplement your current job with the intention of not becoming a software developer, but just to have structured learning? So, James, we actually have, I've actually talked to a few students in your case, people who felt like in order to perform better at their jobs, had to have a greater knowledge and understanding of web development, because they interact with developers and they feel like they don't understand exactly what's going on there. And the intention was to really learn enough to be knowledgeable, have a better interaction, and then ultimately leading to a promotion without necessarily becoming a web developer. So that's definitely something that I've seen happening. It really helps as well to be able to talk about it with your colleagues and your manager as, hey, I'm joining a coding bootcamp. By the way, I'll pick new camp. I'll be biased here because it's part-time, because it's affordable. I will say don't do it if your plan is to quit your job and go full-time in an expensive bootcamp, because then the return on investment may not be here for you. So take part-time, and it helps to communicate with your management that you're attending a coding bootcamp. There's a start date, there's an end date. That puts a little bit of pressure on you as well to actually finish and get the certificate at the end. But it's easier to show the proof and demonstrate your additional skills if you have that kind of timeline and that paper at the end versus, hey, I'm just doing it on my own. I'm doing tutorials and stuff like that. So absolutely that happens. And I've seen that happen, and I've seen good outcomes. People actually getting promotions as a result. What do you think, Olaf, on this one?
Yeah, no, I would pretty much agree with you on all points. And at the end, you might go through the whole thing. You might realize that you really like it, and you might want
Yeah,
to
that's
switch
right.
your job and start doing it eventually. So
Yeah.
I there's no downside really to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's see what else we have here. Maybe we can answer that one really quick. Is the React Native project for New Camp a game? It doesn't have to be. And React Native, correct me if I'm wrong, Olaf, but you can you create mobile apps with React
Mm.
Native, but not necessarily gaming apps using React Native. Or could you? I don't know. Actually,
Yeah,
I don't
you
know.
totally could. Yeah, you could
Yeah,
totally make gaming apps, but it really depends on what you'd want to make. But yeah, no, React Native is basically just React, but for mobile, and it gives you a lot of functionality that you normally couldn't if you're working from scratch or were just interacting with a React website normally. So yeah, you could, utilize event listeners and CSS and Grid to, create a game that way, or you could utilize Canvas and React Native. So you could
yeah,
definitely do something.
yeah. Apparently, there's a bunch of people who are kind of like the idea of joining a game dev bootcamp. Yep, and I know just the guy to ask to build the curriculum. All right, so let's talk about your time at Microsoft. I think we just went through the list here. Um, so how did it come about? I mean, you joined. So actually, let me check your. Maybe you can tell me, but you were a technical writer. You were teaching with us and and for kids. Um, and then you joined Microsoft. Tell us about how you joined Microsoft. What was the interview process like?
Yeah.
All that.
So there's actually a transitioning program for veterans. So if you're in the military and you're getting out, there are opportunities to help you join the workforce. The military's words, not mine. So there's a lot of programs out there to help you. So when you get out and you basically just don't become another statistic, unfortunately. Um, and one of them was the Microsoft System Software Academy, which
Mm,
was basically kind of like a boot camp within itself for veterans,
yeah.
where they basically taught C sharp, the whole C sharp package. We're talking about ASP.NET, we're talking about Azure, um, SQL, all of that. And it lasted for I think about 4 months, and it was like
Yeah.
full time. So instead of going to work, they basically had us go there and do that instead. So I went through that, and eventually got through the interviews, the first interview, the second round interviews, and actually got out of the military and was still waiting to hear back from them. So I didn't have a job at that point, and they eventually got back to me. I actually had several teams. I had about 5 or 6 different teams that wanted me to work on their team
Oh, that's
eventually.
huge.
Yeah, and I always like whenever I say this, I like to preface it with the fact that I would argue that a lot of it hasn't really been luck, and it's not because I'm smart by any means, but it's just a lot of hard work. Like I was networking a lot,
Mhm.
a lot,
Yeah.
a lot, a lot, and I had plenty of different projects to showcase it because I already knew web development previously, so I had an edge over my competition technically because everybody else was there to compete and you know um, like this basically boot camp, but also was like a competition to interview and see if you can make it, because they were only picking whoever they thought was well suited for Microsoft.
Yeah.
Um, uh, the interview process definitely required a lot of knowledge of data structures and algorithms. So if you weren't didn't have really good fundamentals with that, you just weren't making it in the first place. That was primarily for the second round interviews. First round it was more of a personality fit. So a
Yeah.
lot of soft skills. Soft skills is another super big thing. If you're not a team player, if you're not personable, then people are just not going to want to work with you. So that's something that a lot of you have to reflect and see, like, what do you have to work on internally to see how you can improve yourself in not only like technically but soft skills wise. So yeah, I did that for four months, went through the interviews and had them call me back with about like 5 or 6 different teams. I was actually networking at that point in time, weeks about a month or so prior, with um, my manager, who I joined his team
Mhm.
at that point in time, and me having known him prior and known that he was the person that he was made me want to join his team specifically,
Oh,
right?
so yeah, so that's the power of networking. Like you got all those invitation to join because they knew you already. Like you were known, a really known entity. That's super powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what actually helped me get my current job. One of my mentors from Demsys, which I never thought was
Mm.
going to leave Microsoft, left Microsoft to join my current job, the current
Oh, I
company that I'm
see.
working at,
Yeah.
and I saw him post on LinkedIn yet again. So I kind of reached out to him. Why did you leave? Et cetera, et cetera. And I ended up interviewing for them, and that's how I got the current role that I have now as a software engineer 3 at Rise 8.
Nice. What are you doing there? Can you tell us what your job? I'm looking at it. Yeah, Rise 8. Oh yeah, so that's the position. That's you mentioned to me that's a Department of Defense startup.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
they work on a bunch of different things, a bunch of different applications for a bunch of different contracts for the military and other basically Department of Defense agencies and stuff like that.
yeah. And it's really interesting how you're really a living proof that you really need to think about how you're going to bring your past experience into your new web developer job. Like you have that experience in the in Department of Defense or the Army, and that's very valuable now that you're also a web developer, right? That brings you to those type of jobs. You have clearance, so that's super important, and I think that applies to a lot of people. I mean, you don't it's not just if you have a bag, if you've been in the Army or not, but no matter what was your previous industry, you can see that as being an advantage of yours to then get a job that's connected to that industry. So that's super important. So people may actually wonder. So you were working for Microsoft, which for many people is like the holy grail, right? You're working for the FANG, you're there, but then you left. You decided to leave. Can you walk us through that thought process? Like you are at Microsoft and you're
I
going to
could
leave.
I was like I could ask you the same thing. Um,
Yes, it's true. Yeah, I can.
Uh,
I'll answer after that. After you, if you want.
I had a really good time at Microsoft. It really depends on what team you're working on and what you're working on.
Hmm.
Um, if you become skilled enough in whatever you know and are good enough that you can get a job elsewhere, you know, and you're not satisfied of whatever you're doing, you should be able to leave. I loved all my colleagues. I had a really good time at Microsoft and would definitely go back. Um, but I definitely enjoy the work I'm doing now more than I was
Yeah.
over there. I was doing a lot of more infrastructure stuff, a lot of more DevOps stuff.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and the learning curve for all that, like the knowledge that I gained, invaluable, invaluable, just hands down. Um, but I'm enjoying a lot of the stuff I'm doing right now way more. Like at Microsoft, I did a couple of stuff with Planner, I did some stuff with Teams, and then overall just a lot of stuff in infrastructure and DevOps maintenance for a lot of teams across the board
Mhm.
for Microsoft Office. Um, but right now, I'm able to just the startup environment, I think, is a little bit different than
Definitely.
most teams
Yeah.
in a FANG environment. It's definitely not more relaxed by any means. If anything, it's more hours.
Mhm.
But again, and it's not for everybody. Uh, but it's something that I like. It's very much helping me compact a lot of more information faster, which is something that I want. I want a higher ceiling and more information to flow into me so I can learn faster. I'm doing a lot more stuff in languages that I haven't previously done. A lot of backend stuff in Java, a lot of backend stuff in Ruby. Primarily, Microsoft was all C sharp mostly,
Yeah.
TypeScript, JavaScript, React, stuff like that. I am using some of that stuff right now too. We're doing a lot of React stuff, but I'm expanding my wealth of knowledge, which I think is just going to help me down the road.
Yeah. No. Totally. And have you heard about boomerang employees?
Oh yeah,
The term. Yeah. And that's the thing. Your doors to Microsoft are not closed at all, right? And actually, quite the opposite. Microsoft really welcomes employees who have sought that type of experience that you're getting right now. There's a notion that sometimes to you, and you're experiencing that your learning is going to accelerate tremendously if you're actually outside of the Microsoft environment, because you said it at Microsoft, you're gonna learn a new C sharp and the Microsoft stack. Outside, you're gonna have opportunities to learn other stacks, and you're gonna bring back that knowledge then inside Microsoft when you are that boomerang employee. So you may actually be welcome with open arms in a few years, and maybe actually even get a job that you'll enjoy even more because you've had that experience outside Microsoft. And I'm sure it's the same thing for Google and Amazon. Like the boomerang employees,
oh yeah.
yeah, is quite well known. Wow, it has been really amazing, Olaf, to have a conversation with you. I can't believe we're almost at the hour. 2 minutes left, and nobody joined us today. I don't know why. Typically, we have a few people joining us live and asking their questions, using their camera and mic on. Um, how could we? So, what else could we say about you, about your experience? Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
Anybody who is watching this who is really interested into breaking in as a programmer of any sort and is interested in Bootcamp, I will just say that um, remind yourself you, you will constantly be learning new stuff and you're constantly going to feel overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Don't think at any point in time that um, engineers or programmers or developers at any point in time don't feel overwhelmed with one thing or another. You have to just learn to mitigate your expectations and be able to stay calm and focused with new information and keep at it. It's just like when you were in school, when you just first started learning math, first started learning English or anything else. The more you keep at it, the better you're going to be at it.
Yeah.
And if you do go through something like New Camp, you definitely need to put in those hours that we really reinforce that you need to put in. You need to think of it as a second job almost.
Yeah.
The more seriously you put effort into it and time, the better off you're going to be down the road. and your quality of life will definitely improve.
That's great. That's great advice. Well, thank you very much, Olaf, for joining us today. Thank you, James, Code, and Michael for joining us. I see you. I know, Drew, you were there. Zandra, thank you very much for joining. I wish you a great weekend in Marysville, near where I live. And for the story, Olaf and I were, running around the state of Washington in 2018 between Tacoma, Marysville, Everett. Did you go to Bellingham? No, not. You never went to
I never
Bellingham.
went to Bellingham.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and Seattle,
that,
of course.
that was the last time we actually got together was in Tacoma
That's
in
right. Yeah,
person.
was it
Yeah,
Tacoma? Yeah, yeah. Well, all right. So, hey, I'm looking forward to actually seeing you in person again. It was a real pleasure, and enjoy, everyone. Take care. See ya.